So welcome to this quick video on Nano Server. A Nano Server is this new configuration level available in Windows Server 2016 that really provides the lowest possible footprint, significantly smaller even than Server Core. And this is because for Nano Server, it's been completely refactored. It's not now just trying to strip little bits out. Microsoft kind of started from ground zero and just added in the core components required. And it's really focused around two key scenarios. I'm thinking born in the cloud applications and cloud platform, so Hyper-V and scan-out file servers. For other scenarios, I'm probably going to carry on using Server Core. Now, you'll notice I actually don't have a Nano Server installation option when I'm trying to install Windows Server 2016. So if I jump over to the install, I see Windows Server 2016, which is effectively Server Core, and I see Windows Server 2016 Desktop Experience, so server with a GUI and those desktop experience bits. There's no option for Nano Server. So how do I get Nano Server? How do I get this? This is the sort of Nano Server. It's pretty much headless. There's a very basic interface available. So how do I get this? If I log in, and I can still domain join this thing, then I get a basic little menu. I can do some networking configuration, I could customize firewall, but that's about it. Everything else, I'm actually going to do through PowerShell, through WMI. I'm not going to manage it locally. But I get these fantastic savings. It's a tiny VHD size. It's going to be less reboots, less critical updates. But how do I get it then? So what I'm going to do is if I jump over to the Windows Server 2016 media, I've expanded it out to a folder, and you'll actually see there's a folder called Nano Server. If I look inside this folder, I see a number of files. I see some PowerShell scripts, some README. I see a Nano Server WIM. This is the Nano Server environment. And then I see packages. And these packages have these generic, non-language specific pieces of functionality. I can see compute, so Hyper-V, containers, Defender, clustering, guest packages for when it's actually running as a guest on Hyper-V or in Azure. And then I see the localized, the actual components I need to make it language specific. So in this case, I've got the English US available to me. So I've got those neutral binaries and then the language. And Microsoft has a fantastic document that walks through actually how do you get up and running with Nano Server, and I definitely recommend you read that. So over here it's on TechNet, getting started with Nano Server. And it walks through everything you need to know. It's got a quick start. It talks about copying over the Nano Server image generator and the convert Windows image PS1 files from the media, these, into your own folder on your local machine, which I've actually gone ahead and done. So I've copied those over. And then it walks through all the different configurations. This is a very basic creation that it would do. It's adding the guest drivers, so I can run it on a Hyper-V or Azure environment. It talks about if I want to deploy it to a physical machine, what do I need to do to create that? And the big difference is here is I do OEM drivers rather than those guest components. It talks about what I can customize when I create the image. So this is why it's not just part of an installation option when I boot off the media. It doesn't make sense. Because if I just selected Nano Server, it's going to install this basically empty OS environment with no features because they're not even installed by default. The whole point of Nano is I'm going to create my own images. And then from those, I'll use that image to actually deploy Nano Server. So giving you a Nano install option doesn't make a huge amount of sense. So instead, what we're going to do is create our own Nano Server image, and we add the packages in that we require for our piece of functionality. So I definitely recommend you read through it. It talks about joining domains, injecting drivers, everything you need to know. But what I'm going to do is just walk through a very basic introduction of doing all of this. So I can copy over those two files. And now what I'm going to do is some PowerShell. So the first thing we do is we import in that Nano Server image generator PS1 file. So I'm still going to be referencing over here my S drive where I have my expanded 2016 media. So that's my OS images, Windows Server 2016 Technical Preview 4 Nano Server. So I would load in those PowerShell commandlets, that module. I'm then going to create a password that I'm going to use as the local administrator password when I create my images. So now I don't have to do this. I could just be prompted, but I don't want to get prompted for anything. So I'm just creating a variable that has my password in it as a secure string. I then created a variable where I want to output my Nano Server VM VHD file that's going to create. So I'm doing a VHD, so it's going to spit out a generation 1 format. If I do VHD exit, it'll do me a generation 2 VM. It's just the way it's working today. Notice my current working directory is that folder I created where I copied those files to. And then the big thing is this new Nano Server image. So I'm telling it the location of my media, the base location. I'm not specifying the Nano Server folder, I'm just specifying its parent. So that's where my media is. I give it a base path. Think of this as like a scratch folder. It's where it's going to copy things to temporarily, bring in all those neutral binaries, the language specific files it needs to actually create my customized image. Where do I want to output? Where do I want to output my VHD to? So again, I'm using the variable I've already created to create it in my current folder. What computer name do I want this new VM to have? So I'm just using Nano VM. I want to install guest drivers because this is going to be a virtual machine running on Hyper-V. I want to add the storage component so I can use ReFS. I want Defender. I want compute. I want to enable remote management port. So it's going to enable those firewalls. I'm then going to specify my administrator password, which is the variable I created up here. Now notice I could also say, hey, I want to join a domain. I'm not going to do that just for this first image. I don't need to, but it's really that easy. Providing the machine I'm running this from is in the same domain, it will go and create the offline domain join blob, and it will then pass that into this creation. So it will automatically join a domain. And if I'd already joined it to a domain, I'm recreating it. I can do reuse domain node to reuse an existing computer object. So I'll just call this actually VM2. And that's it. So let's just run this piece of PowerShell. So it's processing files, and what it's going to do is start copying things into, so it's created that base folder. There's my Vim. It's getting the packages it needs. And it's really now going to go and create my VHD file. So I'll let this run. This is super fast. This is not a particularly high-powered system. This is just really a local disk it's using. But you'll see this really takes about 30 seconds, which again stretches some of the point of these are throwaway. These are cattle. You often hear me talk about cattle and pets in the articles I do. We're really moving more to a cattle approach. Pets are servers that I name, I care about. If there's a problem, I fix them. Cattle is what we're moving to. Cattle is, hey, if this particular OS instance has a problem, I shoot it and I create a new one. I don't try and troubleshoot. It takes longer to troubleshoot than to just destroy it and start something new. Now, obviously, I have to have the right methodologies and architecture in place so that I don't have stateful information only on that local OS image. It needs to be somewhere else. But providing I do that, I can destroy these very, very easily. So you can see now it's adding those packages into my image. And when this is done, I'm just going to end up with a VHD file. So notice now it's adding an unattend.xml. So that's during the specialized phase. So that's done. I have a VHD file. If I now go and look in my folder, there's my VHD. And it's 700 meg. Because remember, I added those additional components into it. So that increases the size of it. So what I'm now going to do is just mount it just quickly. Because I want to show really the key point. So it's mounted. I can go and look at it. And what it's done is it's created this unattend file. And if I look at it, all it's really doing right now is setting a local administrator password. It's setting the name. So during the specialized phase, when this starts up, it's going to use those values. I can now dismount it. And I can now just use that. So let's take that file. I have a VM I'm kind of happy to just destroy. So let's take this one. I'm going to turn it off. If I look at the settings, it's currently got a hard drive. I'm going to remove it. I'll copy over the VHD I just created. I'll attach it back to the virtual machine. Then turn this thing on. I need to remember to remove that drive. So it just boots from the hard drive. So it's booting from that brand new VHD, and it's done. So it's a startup, and it ran through the specialized phase. If I log in, if I log into it, there's my Nano VM2. It's in a work group, Pacific Standard Time. That was it. So that wasn't just starting up. That was starting up and running through the specialized phase. So super fast. Okay. So let's turn that thing off. And once again, I'm going to remove its hard drive because we're going to create another one. So remove, apply. I'll delete its disk. So this time, I want to do a little bit more. So I'm going to rerun that creation again. And it will just spit out the same disk. But this time what I want to do is join the domain. So I'll go back to my folder where it creates things. I'll delete it. I don't have to clear out that base folder. It can reuse things that's already there. And go. So it's going to create me another one. But this time, it's going to go and create an object. It's going to offline domain join this machine, create the blob that gives it that domain join information. So now what will actually happen is when I start this thing up, it will be a member of the domain. It's already going to create that object in Active Directory. So I'm just going to let that run. So that finished, and if I jump over to AD, I can see it actually created an object in Active Directory. So what I'm going to do this time is I want to look at the unattended answer file again. So once I'm going to mount the file it created, you'll see I've got some extra PowerShells. All this does is it gets the drive letter that it mounted it as, and then automatically creates me a variable that points to the unattended answer file on that mounted VHD. So then instead of having to go and search for it, I can just edit it directly. So there's another change I want to make. I don't want it to be Pacific Standard Time. I want it to be Central Standard Time. So what I can actually do is I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit to my unattended answer file. It's going to get used when it first starts up. So I'm going to save that and then dismount the VHD. And then once again, I'll just copy this over to my VMs folder. And then use it. It's going to go through that specialized phase, start up, and I'm there. So I'll log on. And I'm logged in. And what do I see is I'm now a member of the domain and it's Central Standard Time. You can see there I can then customize through the PowerShell that created the image exactly what it does. Now, I manually edited that unattended answer file. The only other piece of PowerShell I have, so let me actually turn this off again. And final trick, this one. So I created a little bit of PowerShell. And all it does is it does the editing for me. So PowerShell has a great grasp on XML. So you notice this bit of PowerShell I keep skipping over. So what this does is it does the editing for me. So let me just go through. I'm going to delete the image it creates. Delete. I will go through and delete that target for the VM. I'll create a nice blank image again. Create a brand new one. I'm going to do reuse domain node because I'm using the same name that I've already created in AD. I didn't need it the first time, but this time because I've already created that VM with that name in AD, I have to reuse the existing domain node. So now I'm going to go ahead and create that. So that's finished. Now I'm going to go and mount that VHD and go and grab the unattended answer file from it. So again, I'm running each of these steps manually. In the real world, you wouldn't. This would just run as a script, completely unattended. If I quickly go and look at the unattended file, you notice there's nothing in there about time zone. Close that down. So what this little piece of code here does, it grabs the content of the unattended file as XML and stores it in a variable. The next two lines simply create a new XML element called time zone. And then it puts a value of Central Standard Time into that new element it creates. The next line simply says within the XML file in the unattended section, the settings section, and the particular settings is OOB system. In the component section of that, remember if we look at the file, you can kind of trace those names. So what are we doing here? The XML, the unattended is here, settings. The particular settings I want is where the pass is OOB system. Pass is OOB system. Component, yep, because I want to add it at the end of the component. So then I'm appending the child that I just created. So it's going to add under this user accounts line, the end of the component section, my time zone. So I'll close that and run this line. Then I'm simply saving that modified XML back out. So then if I look at the file again, it's now got time zone added to it. And again, I could do anything with this. I could modify existing values. I could add in lots of other stuff. So I can configure some things through switches in the new Nano server image command. But if there's other things I want to do, I can just modify the unattended. And using this script I've kind of given you here, and I've written this up as an FAQ on my site as well, I can do it very easily. Then I just dismount it. And again, the PowerShell could now go and copy this VHD file to VMs. In my case, I'm just going to do it manually, just because I'm too lazy to type in the PowerShell. I could create a VM. I could do all of this completely through PowerShell, completely hands-off. Once again, I'll attach that drive. And what we should see is our shiny VM should be Central Standard Time. So remember, I didn't manually edit anything. I just did it through that PowerShell script. So this time, actually, let's just try and log on. And again, we reused that domain node. I'll actually try and log in as a domain account this time. And it worked. Nano VM, Central Standard Time. And for my management, I could do all of this through PowerShell. Very, very simply. It's just a standard machine. I could manage this through Server Manager. So I have a Server Manager over here. I've already connected to an existing Nano VM I had. That brand new one I just created. And I'm going to get some errors. So there's my new one. I will get errors related to things like Best Practice Analyzer because it doesn't exist in Nano Server as it is today. That may change in the future. Don't know, but it is connecting to it. I can see events coming from Nano VM2, the one I just created. I will be able to go and see the roles and features that I installed to it. You can see Defender, I can see storages. They're the things I added to it. I could use PowerShell to connect to that thing. I could enter a PS session for computer name Nano VM2. And essentially now I'm going to be connected into PowerShell as that machine. Now I'm on it. So that type TZ util I talked about before, if I do /G, it's showing me Essential Standard Time. I could have changed it through this utility. I can get my processes. Anything I can normally do through PowerShell, I can now do. I'm connected to it. And that's it. I mean, that was a super quick, was that about 20 minutes walkthrough of Nano Server. But I really just wanted to demonstrate how easy it was. It seems a lot more complicated than it really is. It's very easy to go and create these images. I can customize them. Let me just show you that link. So I'm going to be creating a lot of articles around Nano Server that are going to go up. So this is a huge one to look at, getting started with Nano Server. The first sort of fact I wrote about this is customizing that Nano Server deployment is now up. If you just go and search for customized Nano Server deployment for John Saville, here's the URL. But I give you the basic code to mount it and then manually edit it. And here's the code that will actually go and do the editing for you. So this example was the time zone. You could do anything you want. If you follow me on Twitter, my Twitter handle is NTFAQGuy. I'll tweet when I upload videos, when I post more code around this, more write-ups. And I'm also going to post up next week. I'm actually walking through more detail of modifying XML with PowerShell. So I hope that was useful, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.